Okay, now that I have everybody's attention, I hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on June 14, 2023 at 7 p.m. I'm Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee. I want to welcome everyone here tonight, and I want to have a reminder that this is being video recorded. I'm going to read our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners. Students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Well, it's so nice to see so many people at the school committee meeting. This is so nice. The next item is the Student of the Month. Our favorite item on the agenda, the Student of the Month program was established in 2019 by the school committee to honor exemplary students. Nominations are collected throughout the year from staff members at all 5 schools. Nominations are made through 5 different categories: service to fellow students, teachers, or community, dedication, determination, and persistence in the face of obstacles, attitude towards learning, determination, high achievement in academics, athletics, or performing arts, and significant improvement in academic, athletics, or performing arts. Selections are made by the chair of the school committee, the superintendent, and 1 member of the policy and advocacy subcommittee. For the second time in Triton's history, we have an entire team to honor this month. I would like to invite Kate Eaton up to talk about why she nominated the middle school math team for this award.
On. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Before I begin, this is really an honor. So thank you so much for selecting the math team. The Triton Regional Middle School Math Team is a student group comprised of 13 students in 7th and 8th grade. Gregory Berger, Olivia Dono, Stephanie Dono, Emily Geist, Avery Hunt, Patrick Jansen, Tafine Khan, Camden Moriarty, Caleb Murray, Hennex Ogren, Austin Squalmiero, Liam Wallen, and Sarah Zaharnowski. They compete in the Intermediate Math League of Eastern Massachusetts. We meet weekly throughout the year to learn and practice math skills to use during the 5 math meets. At each meet, students work both individually and as a team in the categories of geometry, number theory, arithmetic, and algebra. The team travels and competes regionally with Amesbury and Pentucket middle schools, but the team scores are ranked against a division based on past performance. Our current division includes Pentucket, Shore Country Day, Woburn Kennedy, and Ipswich middle schools. The team ranked first in their division this year. They ranked 27 out of the 67 total schools in the league across all divisions. Throughout the year, the students on the math team displayed dedication, perseverance, and teamwork. They consistently attended every practice and worked collaboratively to understand the topics that were tested. Before each meet, I would often see them asking each other for help or discussing different ways to find the solution to a certain type of problem. During the team round of competition, all students collaborated on a set of questions. This particular group of students worked extraordinarily well as a team, breaking up the workload based on individual strengths and checking each other's work in a respectful way. They competed as a team and they celebrated as a team, always congratulating one another on a job well done. I'm immensely proud of this particular cohort of students and will miss their team dynamic as our 8th graders move on to high school next year. Thank you.
Brian provided those fireworks for you guys outside. And as much as I'd love for you guys to all stay, you don't have to stay if you don't want to. The next item is oral communications from the public. Members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee? Seeing none. We better talk fast before the lights go out. The next item is the class of 2023 retirees. June tends to be a very bittersweet time of the year in our schools. We see our elementary students moving up to the middle school, our middle school students moving up to the high school, and our Triton senior class graduating. We also get to acknowledge the valued group of staff members who have dedicated many years of service to our students and families who are retiring this year. Not everyone was able to make it tonight, but I would like to read the whole list, and I would invite those of you who are here tonight to stand as I read your name. Christopher Walsh from Central Office as the Manager of Facilities and Grounds with 27 years of service. Heidi Robinson from Newberry Elementary as a classroom teacher with 34 years of service. Jeanette Loring from Pine Grove as an instruction assistant with 24 years of service. Janet Wallace from Pine Grove as an instructional assistant with 21 years of service. Neil Dunn from Salisbury Elementary as an instructional assistant with 14 years of service. Kerry Muse from Triton Middle School as an instructional assistant with 21 years of service. Soon Densmore from the high school as a music teacher with 28 years of service. And Constant Rowe from the high school as an instructional assistant with 2 years of service. We wish all of our retiring staff members well in the next chapters of their lives and give them our sincere appreciation for their years of dedication, expertise, and hard work. Please join me in congratulating them.
I can honestly say that these 27 years have gone by very, very quickly, and I have enjoyed almost every minute, except when we have weather like this. And I especially have enjoyed the students from my Newberry Elementary School days to my Triton Regional School office, being here, and I've developed relationships over the years with our towns and communities, and I just feel so honored. I'd like to thank the Triton Regional School Committee, the community officials, for allowing me to serve the 27 years for the district. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris.
And we just have to say he's the only one that showed up, so we can talk about Chris just for a second, right? So the amount of ways that this gentleman has connected throughout our communities, all of those who work for our schools work in different communities, but Chris has been a staple in building those relationships with the town. So thank you, Chris. Can I tell Chris? Oh, we're doing stories. This is going to turn into a roast.
It's not. But when I was first elected, I met Chris on one of my first trips into the high school, into central office. And that day was Chris's birthday, and they had published it on the meal menu out to all the students in the schools. And they were all coming by Chris's office to congratulate him on his birthday. And I was like, this is the big man on campus. Like, clearly I just met the most popular guy. And that's going to be my all-time favorite Chris memory.
My favorite memory.
We opened the floodgate.
I was at Newberry no, I was working for the district, and it was election day. And I think I had voted, and I had on my blue blazer and dress, shirt, and tie. And one of the kindergarten students asked their teacher, is that the president? Not so much. Thank you all once again. And I am going to miss everybody tremendously.
The next item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains no donations or out-of-state trips tonight. Motion to approve consent agenda as presented.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? New business, would any members like to raise items for inclusion on a future agenda?
I just have a question. Last month, we heard from a constituent, Elizabeth Novak, and I just am wondering if the committee would consider in the future providing some type of substantive response in the month following, because it strikes me as people that may be watching this meeting on TV, they see the request for information, relief, remedy, call it whatever you want, and then we just kind of surge into the next meeting without responding to that. So I think maybe the committee should consider, if they're amenable to doing that in the future, at least having a discussion about it.
Thank you, Paul. The next item is class rank, student presentation. The superintendent is going to introduce this initiative to study class rank.
Yes, so I'm very close to the mic, sorry. Going to introduce Megan Ober, our Director of Guidance, who has brought a student. I know it's the night before the last day of school. The numbers dwindled. We have a brave soul. So again, just to set the context, this is to provide you with just a high-level preview of the work that's been started by the high school students working with Ms. Ober. Not to get into the nitty-gritty details, in your packet you have 2 student, I'll call them position emails. There are so many possible iterations. It's not just we have class rank or we don't have class rank. So those are very kind of polar opposite, provided just as a setting to share some of the context. This will be a spirited debate, I think is a safe way to put that. But students have expressed interest in engaging in this discussion, so we thought it made sense to kind of end of the year with them coming, just to give you a very high level, not to have us all get into the debate until they bring back a proposal over the course of next year. So I'm handing it to you.
Silva. I'm a future junior, and for the past couple of months, I've been working with 7 other students, 2 of which are seniors, doing a civics project on this, along with the Director of Guidance. And we've been meeting as much as possible weekly with the objective to reevaluate our academic recognition policies and our traditions to promote inclusivity. And to that end, our seniors have visited the Newburyport High School and interviewed their administration about their change in 2017 to their class rank policy. And we also have sent out a survey to members of the school and also neighboring schools. And we've looked at a little bit of data from that, and so far it's basically been very split when it comes to students. Parents we see are more want to keep the class rank policy as it is, and teachers are more willing to change it. We've been discussing possible ideas more than just it is or it isn't. Things like allowing students to earn high honors, but the high honors not being dependent on how your peers perform, or having a percentile rank system, so it's not so exact numbered. And we always explore the option just to leave it depending on what that feedback is. So.
I also just want to commend Owen for being here today, because as you all know, it's the last week of school. There were a lot of conflicts, and so I know, look how far he's like, I'm going to go back here. As we saw our audience completely disappear too, your audience, but we thought we were about to present in front of a crowd there. I think, yeah, Owen did a nice job of outlining kind of the steps that we've taken. In terms of the next steps and kind of where we go from here, we do want to reframe the surveys. Surveys are hard, as I'm sure you all know. Nuance gets lost sometimes in surveys, and more importantly, the community dialogue gets lost. And this is a discussion that we feel like really needs community dialogue and having conversations with students, because I do think no matter how we frame it, questions about school rank come across as very black and white, as Brian said, like one side or the other, rather than the intent of this group was to really just evaluate what is our policy now, is it reflective of our learning culture, and what are different ways we could recognize academic achievement. The goal is to still do that. So that's one piece we wanted to make sure was coming across. We do want to still recognize the academic achievement, but what does that look like? In the guidance office, we certainly see a lot of tension with it being so exact. And we have times where it comes down to thousandths of a point. So we just wanted to have that conversation of what does this look like? And it was so great that it happened to collide that it was student generated as well, that students wanted to have this conversation at the same time that the guidance department was wanting to have this conversation, that our program coordinators wanted to have the conversation, so it all worked out. So again, sorry, back to next steps, is to, again, host some discussion groups around this topic, do more education around our current policy so that we're not actually sure everyone understood what the current policy is and what it looks like. Do some continued research on the impact of class rank, and explore alternatives that still allow for academic recognition. And then either eventually a proposal for some sort of revision to the policy, not a doing away with the policy, but a revision to the policy, or do we land just keeping it as is? So that's kind of what we've been working on really for the past 4 months. Any questions or anything you want to add, Owen? Okay.
Can I just add, so again, to reiterate, and they said it, so this is not about taking away rigor and recognizing academic excellence or giving students the motivation. This is not everyone gets a participation trophy. This is still finding a way to honor academic achievement and the focus on that. But to Megan's point, and again, when you have, I'm making this up, right? It wasn't the case. The difference between the 7th and 8th rank, or God forbid, the 1st and 2nd rank, and it's 100th or a 1,000th of a point. I mean, that's a bad Friday, right? I mean, that's literally what that comes down to, and that makes the difference. And I know the discussions, and I've seen the discussions around the tensions that creates among friends, and it changes things in a negative way. So this is not about right, everyone talks about the participation trophy for everyone. That's not the purpose here. It's a way, it's an opportunity to look at this and find a better way, or a refined way of the same, it could be a class rank, but a different way of looking at it to take away the negatives while still keeping that motivation.
I could ask 2 questions. The first one is, do you have a timeline in mind? As you know, not generally like by the state will have this,
Yep.
and the state will have that, but just in general as to when you,
Yep.
what you think the scope of the time would be?
So timelines are fun, right? Both myself and the 2 seniors wanted to wrap this up by this year. I knew that was really unrealistic, even though I wanted to do it. And I think for the 2 seniors that were part of it, they really wanted to, do that while they were still part of this community. Based on, and that's why it is still important to gather data. Based on the data, we realized that wasn't realistic. There were more conversations to be had that were really important. So the hope certainly is to have a proposal by the end of next year. But conversations take more time than surveys. So we just are going to have to devote more time to that.
All right, thank you for that. And my second question is, so class rank was touched on briefly back when we were doing the homework working group like years ago. And one of the comments that kind of came up over and over again at the time, just as like this is an aside from the homework project, but it's something that I think the same group saw as a value, was that grading is also a part of that. And there had been a grading survey run at the time that had some interesting results. Is there any discussion in grading as part of this? Because I feel like it is part of it, or are you attempting to handle class rank totally separately?
Yep. So you're right. I think in the discussions we've had so far with the students, so the two seniors that came forward also wanted to wrap in the grading as part of it as well. In our discussions, it felt like while those are absolutely two connected things, it was potentially more than the group could take on to tackle both. And so while those conversations are absolutely intertwined, I think the focus of this group is to talk about the academic recognition piece. That may then lead itself to further discussions around grading, but we felt like we had to prioritize one thing at a time.
Perfect, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Megan.
Can I just add one more thing? So you don't have, just in case you go looking, there is no policy on class rank in your policy manual. It is set by policy because of the language in the student handbook. So the process would be, we get to the point where it's ready to be fit for print in the student handbook and then rolls in. I don't know if you talked about kind of phasing in. This is different than a graduation requirement where we obviously have to roll it out to a freshman class. So they have 4 years to meet a new requirement. This wouldn't have to have that same time scale. We certainly wouldn't do this in September and say, hey guys, guess what? But we wouldn't need that 4-year, 5-year kind of phase-in approach.
Yeah, we did make it clear when we were sending out the survey to students that we had no intention of making a change to like the current junior class. That would be pretty abrupt. But we also wanted to allow for if conversations and data led it to be sooner. So I think our mindset initially was it would be a change that whenever, if a change is made and whenever that occurs, again, if, that it would be with an incoming freshman class. But we also wanted to allow for the fact that there might be grade levels that actually wanted the change sooner. So that was also interesting when we look at data and have those conversations. Different year of grads have actually different opinions on it. So we also wanted to allow for that. Okay.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Look forward to hearing more.
The next item is the approval of the ELA curriculum. I would like to request the permission of the committee to move the ELA curriculum up in the agenda to be respectful of others' time. Are there any objections? Thank you. Dr. Anna Bates, the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, will present the results of the English Language Arts pilot for grades 6 to 8, and Tony Marie Evans will be joining her to answer any questions for this discussion.
Thank you. So I will be presenting this recommendation, take you through a little bit of the backgrounds, but I do want to highlight the work that Tony Evans has done in this process in co-facilitating it. I was spending a great deal of time with year one of the CKLA adoption, and we worked very closely together so that she was able to support this process when I was actually at the elementary schools as well. So this process actually began through the exploration of materials for grades K through 6. Last year, you approved the adoption of a K through 5 and the continued pilot in grade 6. At that point, grades 7 and 8 were brought into this process. They were the only core curriculum at the middle school without, or core content area at the middle school without a core curriculum. So in spring of last year, we convened this pilot group. We actually had every ELA teacher in grades 6 through 8 opted into participation in this, so we had a great, we had everyone. So that group, similarly, as we do in all processes, identified the criteria against which the different curricula would be reviewed. It was the same criteria that K through 5 chose, so we were using the rubrics from Ed Reports, looking at text quality and complexity, building knowledge and usability, and also the culturally responsive practices, which is an element that was pulled in from the Curate rubrics. So these criteria were first used to identify the curricula that the the group wanted to learn more about. Amplify was one that was initially piloted in grade 6, so we brought that back to grades 6 through 8. They also chose to explore further EL education in My Perspectives, which is a Pearson product. So we had publisher presentations from each of those 3. And at that point, it was decided to pilot just Amplify and EL education. So each was piloted for about 10 weeks. The piloting teachers participated in initial professional development, and then ongoing work. Every PD day was, there was some sort of type of collaboration, lesson planning, unit internalization that was going on as part of that project. So we gathered a great deal of feedback. Participants in the actual teachers provided feedback in alignment with the agreed upon criteria. Parent surveys were sent out. We got information from student surveys. And the committee found that EL education outperformed Amplify in all of the areas: text complexity, knowledge building, usability, and culturally responsive practices. The student feedback revealed a higher level of engagement with EL than with Amplify. But something a little different here is the group was unable to get consensus. I think that this was going to be fully recommended by everyone in the group. So that is where this sort of deviates a little bit from the most recent recommendations that I've brought. But based on that review and based on sort of that data, this is the recommendation that we're bringing forward. Throughout this process, we were awarded a grant for the implementation of high quality oh, I'm sorry, not that one. We do have that grant too. This is high quality instructional materials, which includes some upfront professional development. So we use that professional development to increase our leaders' capacity, myself, Tony, Al, Heidi, to really learn more about not EL education necessarily, but really to learn more about the shifts that are required with the latest standards. And I think everybody sort of experienced through that learning, this understanding that this was the right recommendation for our district. So that's kind of where we are today, is bringing the recommendation for the adoption of EL education for grades 6 through 8.
Does anybody have any questions?
So I guess having had a child that I got feedback on this as well. But I guess my question comes on the lack of consensus. I'm just curious about how much of a difference that there was across the team members, if there was a specific subset that felt like it was inappropriate. Like, I'm curious if, obviously we have a split here with grade 6 that's at the elementary school, and 7, 8 at the middle school. I was wondering if that was part of the mix and kind of what the rationale behind the different members weighing in was.
Sure. So yes, there was a split. It wasn't by elementary versus secondary. The split was, there were some feelings from the 8th grade teachers about student engagement in that area. Something that I probably should have told you about is we ran into some hiccups with this pilot. We did not get the delivery of the actual materials due to shipping delays for the beginning of the Amplify pilot, which tied every classroom to an online pilot. And words that or feedback from teachers and I think from students was they felt tethered to computers because of that. So that was something out of our control, but it 100% played into this. Another issue was we had some pretty poor professional development with EL education. And as we've been working with this independent group instruction partners over the last couple months, we're realizing how little our teachers were prepared. And whenever you do an implementation, there's stronger PD than there is a pilot, but this was particularly a weak PD that we didn't necessarily prepare our teachers to do this the way that we can with an implementation. It was also, the timing was a little off with EL, particularly in 8th grade. It was split up with the DC trip, with MCAS, with preparation of end of the year things, just lots of interruptions, and it tended to draw what would have been a more concise piloted unit into a much larger thing. So feedback was really about engagement. They're worrying about the teachers worrying that the text would not be engaging enough for students. However, the student feedback did not reflect that same, their feedback on engagement was much higher for EL than it was for Amplify.
Thank you. So just overall, I want to make sure that I'm clear on this. We feel like even though it was split, EL is overall the best solution that is available out there for Triton.
I believe so. I've never had this before where we weren't coming and saying, we all agree. So we did discuss, like, is this something that we want to continue to explore for one more year? And I feel very strongly that a continued pilot is not the best thing for our students, particularly because we've already identified our criteria. We identified the programs that best meet the criteria, and all these programs are already noted as being high quality by Ed Reports as well as by Curate. If we were to look into an extended pilot, we would have some students in our district who piloted materials in ELA 3 years in a row, and I don't feel that that's the best thing for students. I feel confident in EL education as being the best program for us.
I just had one other piece too. So unlike other subject areas, we're moving from a no curriculum, right? And we had these similar discussions with the K through 5 adoption. We're moving from no curriculum to for those who are not fans of curriculum, a boxed canned system, if you will. So I think part of that is that discussion overall, and that just the kind of, I won't call it a feeling, I guess it is a feeling, of math, we've always had a curriculum, so we're choosing one or the other, versus the shift from a more homegrown to a more...
I would like to not use the term canned curriculum if possible.
Absolutely.
And I prefer high-quality instructional
Absolutely.
materials, which has a clear definition that's set
I said
by the
those
state.
who would not be a fan of, right?
Yes, so I
Me.
do think that...
Thank you for that correction.
You're welcome. I do think there's a piece of that. This is a huge shift from find whatever resources you want and develop it on your own to, no, we're all going to be doing the same thing. We definitely have had variation in the experiences that our students have based on the teacher that they're assigned, and this will provide a sort of more equity for our students in that. We also had a lot of discussions about the importance of background knowledge and building background knowledge in providing access to future learning, so that by providing all students with the same background knowledge in grades 6 through 8, we're then evening the playing field for them as they move forward into learning in high school as well.
All right, so I've got a couple of questions. So obviously, again, like Narissa had watched that happening in kind of real time. One of the things that I kind of felt I noticed, and I was also thinking about it from the terms of a high school English teacher, I didn't see as much reading as I've seen in the past, particularly like novels, that type of rigor that would prepare them for higher level high school classes. Is that a result of the pilot? Is that a result that built into the programs? Is it more shorter pieces?
So, a result of the pilot, and so 8th grade piloted the first unit as well in both programs, because that's what's recommended to build up the routines and their knowledge of the program. So there was some duplication and not as much sort of in depth in what you would get into in subsequent units as well. EL education, though, it's set up in modules, so students would be engaged in modules with a core text in each one of them, which includes in some cases it's a novel. In the first unit in grade 7, it's a collection of literature from the Harlem Renaissance, and then there are other sort of supplementary readings that come in as well. But I don't know if, Tony, do you want to speak to? And you can welcome to sit down if you'd like. No? Okay.
Yeah, hello.
So to answer your question in particular, I agree with what Anna said. Unfortunately, 8th grade did implement the Module 1 and then Unit 1. So that's more figurative language and metaphors. It was very redundant for the students. They did read a text, 8th grade in particular. They read Summer of the Mariposas. And then 7th grade read a collection of poetry from the Harlem Renaissance. So if I had to say 7th grade probably had a better experience because they implemented Unit 1 for Amplify and Module 3 for EL. So they had more of a vast, diverse scope of what the text that they were reading. 6th grade did some Greek mythology, which they, I'm sure, loved. Who want to read The Lightning Thief. But to answer your question more specifically, headed in, if we do choose to go this route, EL's really good at complementing literature with the nonfiction and embedding it throughout. So for example, in 7th grade, they would read poetry about the Harlem Renaissance, but then they would also read biographies or informational texts about Langston Hughes and what his life was like and what it was like during the Great Migration into establishing, this cultural revolution. So EL does a good job of complementing both nonfiction and fiction texts, but unfortunately, like Anna said, the PD that we received was lackluster. We're doing a better job of that now, and we've found some great people to help us with that.
One other question, and this is not specifically about the programs, but just about how we would implement them. One of the things that I have seen sometimes happen, you talked about the variations and experiences based on different teachers, is that sometimes these programs, which is probably why you objected to canned curriculum, can maybe drag everyone towards the middle. Is there an opportunity to ensure that some of the good things that are happening can still happen, that will continue to go on?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think there's commitment from all the leadership to provide as much, close to every PD day for collaboration across schools and across grade levels as we implement in year 1. And one thing that I've tried to do as part of this pilot process is really to separate curriculum and instruction, because they are two very different things, and honoring the great teachers that we have and giving them the ability to bring that to the classroom using the curriculum as a vehicle to do that. So yes, this is, they're going to have time to work through this together, I think, to really we've been doing some work on just the process of unit internalization. What does that look like, and how do we prioritize the questions that we're asking? And it's not, nobody's reading a script. We don't want that. We want them bringing their voice to the classroom and their energy to the classroom, and really separate those two things.
Obviously, even thinking about units as well. I'm particularly thinking, we saw the poetry night at NES last week, and it was phenomenal, and things like that. It would be a shame to lose some of that.
Yeah, I think with anything new, we're going to have to see where that fits. If some of these do have a scope and sequence that builds on it, but then if poetry is taught at this particular time of year, maybe the event is in February rather than at the end of the year. So yeah, I think as we move forward in implementing anything, we'll have to figure out how do we still highlight the work. I will say that just because you use poetry as an example, that feedback has been really good about the poetry instruction and student engagement in poetry. I think in 7th grade with the pilot, and then also in CKLA, I've heard from teachers who said, I hate poetry, to now I love teaching poetry, and students are excited about it. So yeah, we want to build on that excitement.
Thank you.
Can I just add one more thing? I'm an advocate for sharing and celebrating creativity with students, and I will say I do believe that EL does a nice job of that. For example, in 8th grade, they would create their own monster, so they would read about Latin American folklore, and then they would create their own. And there's really ample opportunity in this curriculum to showcase students' creativity too. And I think that that is an opportunity for us here at the middle school and in sixth grade, because we're all together, to really showcase creativity too. It also has high standards assessments, and it meets the Common Core and the curriculum that we need to teach, but it also, it really can highlight kids' creativity as well, which I think is important, especially at this age, to get the buy-in.
Are there any other questions? I just have one. You said that the PD wasn't as good as you would like it to be. Is that because it was from an outside source coming in, or was that internal? Or what is it that you think you would do differently to make it better?
I can answer all of that. So, something, EL Education is actually a nonprofit organization, which I like that piece of it. Their goal is to get high quality material into all classrooms. So the whole curriculum's open source. Anyone can access this. They actually contract with another group to provide the PD. So it was the particular presenter, her lack of familiarity with the experience of our teachers, and there was a lot of bad stuff with that. I will say, though, with the growth of high-quality curriculum materials, and this is in all areas, and people are now adopting these across the country, a lot of these companies have grown very, very fast, and they don't always have the human resources, I think, to support it in terms of, or in even the physical resources can't keep up with the demand that they have. So we have a lot of people working for some publishing companies that are not great PD presenters. I have shifted my belief now after doing some work with a couple of different organizations this year, one being Instruction Partners and another being TNTP. That's, I think, the best help for support with implementation in anything is somebody who's an expert in implementation, and then also in a particular curriculum area, not necessarily an expert in that, not a salesperson, not a publisher. So it's been a nice shift for me to see that as well, and thinking about how can we leverage this support in all different areas across the district.
Middle school appreciate presenters who can appreciate middle school teachers, because we are very unique.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the implementation of EL education for grades 6 through 8 ELA as presented?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Al.
You can stay if you want to. The next item is subcommittee reorganization. Thank you for sending me your subcommittee preferences. I tried to take into account everyone's preferences and logistics as much as I could in recommending assignments for the coming year. I would like to take a moment to thank Paul Lees for his lengthy service on personnel and negotiations. This is not the first time he has been asked to move to a different, subcommittee, but I know I and past chairs have felt it was important with so much past experience on Triton's contract negotiations that he was always asked to remain on the personnel and negotiations, and he has always been willing to stay there when he was asked. This year, I am happy to recommend that his request for a move to a different subcommittee be granted. There are 3 other recommended moves shown in the document. Caitlin would move to fill the empty slot on personnel. I would move to policy, and Narissa would move to finance. I appreciate everyone's flexibility. Can I get a motion to approve the subcommittees for the 2023-2024 year as presented?
I'll make the motion. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, and at each of your next subcommittee meetings, please elect a chair for the subcommittee as well as your schedule, and you can just let me know what both of those will be. The next item is the school committee member handbook. By each of us reviewing the handbook each year, it gives us a chance to review any changes we want to make, as well as a good time to be reminded of what our roles and responsibilities are. Does anyone have any additions, changes, or any comments they would like to make to the school committee handbook?
Could we just put a date on the document? I know it's saved with a date, but could we just put a date on it?
Oh, on the school
Document
committee document,
itself.
yes, absolutely. So we don't have to vote on it, it was just, I think we should review that every year, just so that we're up on what our responsibilities are too. The next item is the report on the mathematics review. We have a few curriculum items tonight, starting with mathematics. I can't say the word. I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Anna Bates.
Thank you.
Let her say the word.
So this mathematics plan is a product of the end of stage 1 of our curriculum review process. So we had a great representative group this year from all pre-K all the way up through high school, inclusive of general educators, special educators, building administrators, district administrators, who first started taking a look at our previous action plan, and then at where we are right now, and then where we wanted to move to. So that's what is reflected in this document. So we met a total of, I believe, 8 times between October and May, and at the same time, there was a lot of other sort of parallel work going on. So at the same time, we had a group participating in DESE's Instructional Prioritization Institute. So we brought a team there with a focus on mathematics. And I also meet regularly with the district math specialists. So some of the work is shared, but it's all kind of working us in the same direction. So we did a thorough data analysis of it took a lot longer, I think, and we needed to give it the time that it deserved. But what we found, I think, as general themes were that we have room to grow in early numeracy skills, general achievement in mathematics in grades 2 through 10, as evidenced by both iReady and then later with MCAS. But really paying particular attention to students in our low-income subgroup and also students with disabilities. So we developed this vision of mathematics, and the goal of this action plan is to really build that bridge between this data analysis of where we found we are today and what's going to get us to this vision. So it is divided up into 3 different sections: curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And I can just take you through some of these actions, and because some of them have actually already begun, and I can update you on where we are with them. So through this, we had a recommendation to explore high-quality instructional materials for pre-K. We have no pre-K math curriculum at this point, and Molly Ananasoff has already met with the pre-K teachers actually today, and has 6 volunteers just from general classroom pre-K teachers who we want to be part of this exploration, and then we're going to bring the elementary math specialists into that group as well. So next year we'll be exploring high-quality instructional resources that can be used in all of our pre-K classrooms. Anytime we're exploring resources, we are committed to providing quality professional development to teachers who are implementing those. We have identified the action step of establishing expectations for math fact fluency, and the math specialists have already begun work on this. They've set targets for different grade levels and have just a more structured approach that if you don't meet this target by this grade, this is what you're going to have in the next grade, and these are the resources we're going to use. So that's definitely still in draft form, but is something that we're going to be moving forward with. They are also going to be developing a bank of early numeracy warm-up activities for use in grades K and 1 mathematics classrooms. They already have pacing charts that have resources linked to them. Some of them are videos introducing the Math in Focus chapter, and then, but they're also going to be linking to those pacing charts, the warm-up activities that could be used to develop those early numeracy skills. We discussed establishing expectations for student calculator use in grades 7 and 8 to make sure that when students are going to be asked to engage in different mathematical tasks on MCAS without a calculator, that's not the first time that they've done that. So that's going to be, Kelly Buckley, middle school math specialist, is going to be taking the lead on that. We are going to be looking at reviewing and prioritizing standards for K through 6. We don't teach the entire Math in Focus curriculum because there aren't enough days in the school year. And I think I'm finding this with curriculum that are built for 180 school days or 185 school days. The reality is we don't have 185 instructional school days, and something's falling off the end right now. And we can make better decisions about what do we want to prioritize in instruction. So that's going to be, we're going to be working through that next school year with the elementary math specialist. We found that we need to explore high quality instructional materials. This says grade 6 through Algebra 2. It's actually grade 7. Grade 6 was in there because most curriculum materials have that split at grade where you have like a secondary one. So we just wanted grade 6 to be aware of the process. But right now, grade 7 through Algebra 2 are not necessarily aligned with the most current standards, and we do not have high quality instructional resources in all of those classrooms. Because we're using different editions of textbooks and we're finding a lot of overlap, that sometimes students are getting the same standards twice and sometimes they're not receiving them at all. So we definitely have some work to do in working vertically, and I think one thing that can help us there is having a common resource in those grades. And that's next, vertical alignment in grades 7 through 12. This came from the teachers who just want to have quarterly meetings of students to review curriculum, instruction, assessments, including the alignment of grading practices to standards, so that we have set aside some time for those groups to engage in vertical conversations. Let's see, want to have some conversations regarding instructional time in mathematics. With the implementation of CKLA, we have very clear number of minutes that are used for instructional time across grade levels, across schools. We do not have that for mathematics. It varies by school. It varies by a number of different things. So we just want to bring the leadership team into that, to take in the consideration of scheduled time for mathematics instruction. If this is an area that we really need to grow, we may need to really think about the time that we dedicate to instruction in that area. The next item on here is a collaboratively developed instructional priority. So this was the product of a instructional prioritization institute that was primarily administrators and a math specialist who attended. And the instructional priority was that mathematics teachers prepare and deliver high quality learning experiences grounded in Math in Focus curriculum in order to give all students, particularly those with disabilities and lower income, access to grade level appropriate tasks and instruction within the Tier 1 setting. And we do have some action steps to help us achieve that. Most of them are actually not directed at teachers, but are things that we can do as instructional leaders to make that vision and make that instructional priority more of a reality. One of those things is to align feedback using a common tool in all grade levels. So the math specialists have already begun working on this. Different evaluators and different instructional leaders, whether it's a math specialist or a coach, are all using different instruments to provide feedback to teachers at this point. Some are using what to look for guides from the state. Some are using the walkthrough checklist provided by Math in Focus. Some are using a instrument provided by our math consultant titled Best Practices in Math Instruction, but we really want to provide that clear support. This is what you should be seeing in mathematics classes, and here's how you can help help teachers achieve that. So they're working on the development of that instrument. This next one is kind of, we've got to work on it, pull a group together to build excitement around learning in mathematics for students. And we used to have some elementary math competitions, some math nights that were happening at the schools. We had some discussions about connecting our secondary students with our elementary students to build up this enthusiasm. So it's something that we definitely need to spend more time exploring next school year. We want to continue to strengthen support for teachers in the practical application of mathematics concepts in grades 7 through 12. This is something that's embedded within the Math in Focus curriculum with the anchor tasks, but I think is an area we found is a little bit of an opportunity for growth in the secondary grades. We've been working with Susan Resnick, a consultant who we've been working with for years. She's been working with the administrators at the secondary level, both with Al and Patrick, and then with the high school teachers too, about sort of moving those mathematics application sort of problems to the beginning of a unit to support engagement, to give students a connection. Oftentimes they're found at the end of a unit, and when pacing is a concern, that's what falls off, so that they're missing that practical application. So we're going to continue working with her on that. I think it's been, I didn't see the work that Susan did with the math department when she was here, but I did see the work that they were doing after her work with them, and it's great. Like, I love that they're collaborating on this and just sharing ideas, and they're really working on developing and sharing a common set of problems across courses. We want to continue to provide support for instructional leaders into providing feedback in mathematics instruction. A number of our evaluators are not mathematics teachers, and we need to move, myself included, we need to move beyond, to be able to provide feedback in mathematics pedagogy. So we have been working with our consultant to do that, and we'll continue to work on that. And one thing we've been doing over the last, I think, year or two is providing a model goal for the evaluation system that teachers can choose to use or choose not to. But so we did that with CKLA. We did that for the counselors this year, and I think by providing a model goal focused on mathematics may be helpful to teachers, just kind of keep that in the forefront of their minds too. So I'll be developing that over the summer and then provide it as an option for teachers to use in an evaluation if they choose to. We're going to be exploring progress monitoring assessments for grades K through 1. We currently use Forefront and Early Numeracy Screener, but it's a benchmark and it doesn't provide sort of those intermediate checkpoints that really inform instruction. And then we also want to look at exploration of alternative structures for benchmark assessment to limit the impact on instructional time. Every school kind of does iReady a little bit differently. Some do it out of math classes and it's taking days out of math classes. Some set it up more like MCAS where the whole school stops and we're doing it during this time. So just having those conversations about what are the benefits to each one of those and how do we minimize the impact of assessment on instructional time. So a lot of great work done by this group. I really enjoyed working with them. They're already wanting to come back and they're saying, when are we going to be meeting about this to continue this work? So one other thing that didn't make it in here because we didn't do it until this week and last week, where we've pulled some focus groups of students to ask them about improvement in mathematics, which has just been a really great experience. I think it was certainly for me and the math specialists who got to lead these groups, but even for the students who said, wait, you're asking me? You want to know what I think about making math better? Which I think the more we can do that, the better. So nothing to document in this plan yet, but we will be reconvening this group to look at the data.
Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Paul.
So Anna, when you were identifying that in the past, there have been times where certain texts don't cover a certain area and then there's overlap. In the past, I remember, PD doing curriculum mapping. Is that all sort of the same thing?
So the maps are in need of update as well, but some of our textbooks actually predate the latest mathematics standards. So they're not aligned with the current framework. And we have, for instance, we have a text that's used in the upper level math class in 8th grade, which is different from the text that's used in the comparable class at the high school. So depending on when you take that class, you're getting different experiences. So that's why we need to kind of, but yes, curriculum mapping is an area that we also need to focus on, but one thing at a time.
Narissa?
I just have two questions. So one of them is with putting an actual math curriculum, the intent to put an actual math curriculum in pre-K. Obviously, that's probably our age group that we service the most, where there's the least consistency going on to the next grade. There's, I feel like, a lot of kids that that get added between pre-K and K. Is there a plan if you're going to actually putting a math curriculum in pre-K to make sure that those kids who are coming from an outside wherever, right, another preschool, they were at home, whatever, to get them quickly caught up to where the pre-K students from our actual elementary schools end the year after having gone through that instruction?
So this is the question, is there a plan?
Yeah, is there a plan? Because I feel like in some of those cases, it's like half a class could be
Oh, yeah,
a
it could be
non...
from, yes. So I think we certainly don't have control over what they're learning or not learning in other areas, but what we do is beginning of the year, I feel like particularly at the K level, they're so good at like understanding where students are. And we do these, we'll be using Forefront, the early numeracy screener, identifying students immediately who are in need of extra support and then getting that support in. I think we're going to have to do more exploration of the materials. We use Bridges as a curriculum in some of our small group math classes. They have a pre-K one. It's very manipulative heavy, and I think that's what we want to look for is hands-on experiences for students so that they can really develop these like number sense. So it's, my hope is we don't end up with something that's like, okay, you finished this workbook at the end of pre-K, that we're just really developing their sort of early mathematical skills through activities.
Thank you. And my second question is, this has come up just from our discussions through the year, and then most recently the iReady data being sent home to families. Do you feel like there's a good understanding on caregivers of the math achievement of their students?
I don't know if I know the answer to that. I think with sharing their own students' assessment results in the grades which would just be, it's grade 1 at Salisbury and grade 2 through 8 everywhere else, I think they probably have a better understanding now than ever before, because, well, actually, no, we communicate pretty well through the standards-based report cards at the elementary level too. I would think that provides clear information. I think a little less clear once you get to the middle school and you're maybe wondering what does a B in math mean and how many things are factored into that. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but I don't know really the answer to that. It would be interesting to ask.
I feel personally the discussions that I've had this week, which I've intentionally gone out and had with a variety of families just based on, kind of my knowledge of them, I would say that there's a disconnect between what we see as kind of the roll-up MCAS and iReady scores, what they believe their students' math achievement to be, and what they're saying in a standards-based report card. It's not all, I don't think it's coming together in a way that caregivers have a good sense of their students' mathematical, in particular, achievement.
So now you have me thinking about a potential revision to this action plan related to family engagement and communication.
I mean, it's maybe a separate conversation, and you
Yeah.
have way more context than I have had. I've talked to maybe like 7 or 8 families. It's just like, as you're having these conversations and they're like, well, I saw my child was below grade level, but I'm not sure what that means or what it's going to take to get them to grade level. But their report card seems to say that they're doing okay. I'm seeing a lot of like 2+ and 3s, like my student is there or almost there. You
Yeah,
know, and I'm not the person. I was just trying to kind of pull out what families are getting out of this experience that we're providing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we need to, and it also brings up too, that we need to continue to look at our grading and make sure that our grading is reflective of, because it's the MCAS is standards-based assessment. iReady is based on the Massachusetts standards, that we need to make sure that we're reporting out on those standards as accurately as we can.
I agree with.
Many families today because Salisbury's came out, and I mean, I have the benefit, I have children on an IEP, so I meet a lot more and see a lot more of the testing, so there's a lot of communication but what landed in families' emails today led to, well, I thought they were doing fine, but then I got this, or I saw a lot of growth, but it says they're not grade level or they're still below. So I think there's a lot of confusion in the difference between growth, which is amazing, and being core or grade level, which is slightly different. And I think there might be some discrepancies when it comes to report cards or even informal communications with their teachers, because they'll say like, oh, they're doing great, or, you know, the day-to-day stuff, I'm sure they're doing well, and that's what they're reporting on. But then the report card comes home and it says 2+ or 3, and then iReady comes home and it's a little less gray. So I've had multiple conversations today in discussing kind of the difference between growth, which is awesome, and that's like how your child has progressed, versus maybe an informal, like they're doing great in class. So I don't know, I wouldn't know how to solve it in the sense, because they're not wrong in any of those types of communication. Like, a family was never misled.
Right.
It's just they're measuring different things, and that's hard for a parent maybe or a caregiver to take in.
Goes back to what I think Anna said, I think makes sense about adding a goal or what's in the plan, but the act of engaging families around that information so they're aware of how their student is doing, especially when we're talking changes in curriculum, have you, so.
Yeah, and I think it's this time of year is tough too. When I wordsmith that letter so many times because this is sort of, it allows us to see a student's trajectory over the year, but it's not the time to then say, well, where do we go back and where do we need to fill in? Like, that's what we will do in the fall benchmark, which will really give us where are they at the beginning, how do we use that information in instruction, and then I've had a number of people reach out to me with questions too, and they've been great conversations. Just understanding the information that's in that report and what does it measure? What does it not measure? Where is the growth? Like, I had a lot of questions about what does tested out mean? And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And so I hope that opening that communication and doing this more consistently, like at the beginning of the year next year too, will just increase communication between families and the schools.
Anybody else have any questions?
You have in here established clear expectations regarding the instructional time. Can you just give us an idea of how much time is being allocated approximately and where those discrepancies are?
Sure. So it is, I would say at the elementary level, we're looking at 60 minutes or more of mathematics instruction. Some significantly more because they pair up, those who are departmentalized are they have it back to back with ELA, so they're getting 90 minutes of math instruction in 6th grade in some schools. It depends on the number of teachers that are at each school, or is it a team of 2, is it a team of 3, are there 4 teachers, and how does this, so all of those things kind of play into it. And then we move to the middle school, and they have, I believe, 48 minutes of math instruction. So the time spent learning something has an impact. And so there's a variation due to a number of different factors, and I think we just need to kind of sit down and hash that out. And at some point say, if this is an area where we really need to grow, then we have to put the time into it. Just as I think we did with ELA, and said this is a priority. Everybody at this grade level is getting 90 minutes, 120 minutes, depending on the grade level, like we did with CKLA. Now, I'm not saying we're moving to 120 minutes of mathematics instruction, but we just need to get together and have those conversations, and then I think common across schools.
I just have a question on the assessments. You said that every school is using them differently. I don't know, that kind of concerns me that they're using them differently.
Not using them differently, but it's been, so some schools will say, okay, here's the window. You, as a teacher, can figure out in these 6 weeks, when do you want to assess your students in it? Where others are saying, okay, it's an early release day, we're not running the rest of the classes. Students are coming in and they're taking this until they're done with it, and if they don't finish, the next day we're doing makeups just as we do with MCAS. So not that they're using it differently. Every school has an assessment plan. Every school has time in that assessment plan where after administration of assessments, they're sitting down, they're having data meetings, they're using that data. So I apologize if I implied they were using it differently. They're just administering the assessments in a different way. And so if you have one student, and it's an adaptive assessment, so it does take different students different amounts of time to kind of pinpoint that area where they are. If you have 1 or 2 students who it's taking longer for, that could, depending on how you've structured this, it could hold up that whole class from moving on in instruction because a couple students are still assessing.
The other question, well, I guess it's not a question, it's just a comment, is I'm glad to see that you're strengthening the supports for teachers, because I know the in-focus over the years has been not as good as teachers have wanted it to be. And probably most of that was the lack of support that they were having.
Yeah, that's actually how we started this process, is we looked at our old vision for math instruction. We looked at the steps that came out of our action plan, and we used a Likert scale in different groups to say how far did we achieve this? Did we achieve what we set out to do? And we did not. And a lot of it was because of the support wasn't there to do that for a variety of different reasons.
I like to see that the math specialists are really heavily involved in the supports for the teachers and everything. I think that's very important that you have that.
Oh, so involved. We have such a great group of math specialists here who work amazingly well with their teachers at their schools and also together. So yes, we're lucky to have all of them.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? No, thank you.
Say, do you want to just stick with Anna and just skip over to equity statement and I'll come back to that? Just, she's on a roll, or do you want to break?
No, it's a marathon. I'm just going to.
My guess, I know Anna enough. I was thinking she'd want to just keep going and then, if you're okay with that, sorry.
I'm perfectly fine with it, because Anna's fine with it.
Yes.
Anna just doesn't want you talking tonight.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Erin. So am I moving on to summer programming? Okay, this is a collaborative effort, Shannon and I together. Just to give you an update on summer program, because it does look differently this year than it has in the past 2 summers. We don't have the larger scale academic programming that we had ESSER funded over the last couple of years, but we do have some grant funding that's supporting some innovative programming at some of our schools. So at Salisbury, we have a summer program where we've combined the efforts of Title I and our after school and out of school time programming, which is focused on STEM activities and social emotional growth as well. So Katie Zarba and Kara Balkas have been we've all been working to put this program together. So there's an academic component. All students there will be getting reading instruction, math instruction, and then also enrichment. So we have just under 50 students in grades 1 through 6 who are enrolled in that. Those students were chosen based on a number of different data points. So Pine Grove School is also offering summer programming through the ASOST grant. Once again, it's STEM focused, but they have some really cool stuff going on: architecture, environmental science, real world mathematics instruction, mindfulness. There's some physical education involved in there. So Kyle Campbell is running that one, and then Sarah Burns is coordinating the program, Newbury teacher coordinating at Salisbury for that program. And then we are providing transportation for the Salisbury program to get the, because of the Title I component there, we're not providing transportation at Pine Grove School. And then we have the Kids Club programming running at Salisbury and Pine Grove, but also open to Newbury Elementary students as well.
All right, so I will review.
Does anyone have any questions?
I waited a second. I was trying to get you off of that. All right.
Great.
So special education ESY programming really hasn't changed from last summer. The numbers, as we've talked about through the budget process, has increased, but we have the district ESY preschool program, and this is students throughout the district. They go to Newbury Elementary School, and these are the services, the ESY services are identified on their IEPs. That's how the students are identified to have the program. So that runs from 8:30 to 11. As I said, Newbury Elementary School, and we have 7 preschool students enrolled. We also have the district-wide ESY elementary program for grades K through 5. That's at Newbury Elementary. That runs from 8:30 to 12:30. And again, it's students who it's identified on their IEP. They receive their IEP services. They participate in a structured schedule, and they continue to engage in social interactions. So that program has about 13 students right now enrolled in the program. The TLC and ALPS program have a separate ESY program, and that runs from 8:30 to 12:30 at Newbury Elementary, and we have 25 students enrolled in that program together, in those 2 programs together. The middle and high school also have their own ESY program. Again, the length of the program for the students is identified in their IEPs. Triton Middle School has 3 students, and the high school has 7. We have the 18 to 22 TLC program at the high school, and that runs from 8 to 12, and we have 6 students. That program, a lot of that program is out in the community. We're bringing the students out for vocational experiences, or I think, they do karate, they go to art activities, things like that. So it's kind of a continuation of what they're doing during the school year. And then we have tutoring. Our tutoring numbers, as we've talked about, have increased also. So tutoring it takes place at their, the elementary school the student attends, or the middle school or the high school. And that's identified through the special education team, whether a student needs tutoring. And it does say that we'll conduct special education meetings, but as you know, tomorrow's the last day, so these are probably the confirmed numbers. So, any questions about that?
Have any questions? Do we have no staffing issues with any of these?
Yeah, we're staffed for us.
We're working on it still. For Kids Club, we are still working to hire a couple to support a couple of students who need a higher level of support right now. But we're close to getting everybody in who wants to be in.
Thank you.
And one thing I forgot to say is I usually at this point provide a update on summer professional development for teachers and that programming. I neglected to get that in the agenda, but I will share out 2 resources with you, or via email, sharing what's open to Triton teachers, and then also what is open to teachers, all Triton teachers, but through a collaboration with Newburyport and Pentucket as well. Sorry about that.
Okay, the next item is the draft equity statement. The superintendent is going to take us through the leadership team's draft equity statement.
So you have in your agenda a background document as well as the equity statement that was drafted by the leadership team. And again, just to confirm, that's the three individuals to my right, plus Greg Kulowick, the Director of Technology, along with the 5 building principals, all the assistant principals, Director of Guidance, Director of Athletics. So we have spent the last 18 months really calibrating the 18 of us around how best to lead the work of equity. I know it's kind of gone through the same metamorphosis that the committee has, and focused and landed on the concept of belonging. Every day we hear in the news about some group, organization, city, town, district that's dealing with issues, and a lot of times we throw in a DEI officer, or we throw in this, or we throw in that piecemeal to solve problems. Our focus has been making sure that the 18 of us are aligned to make sure that we're able to lead the work. So it's uniform, it's consistent everywhere you go in the district. So it certainly took longer than we expected. We've been working with Michael Eatman, and he's been working with us individually. There's literally been one-on-one work with all 18. There's been work with the teams within the schools, and he's worked with us as a full team of 18 as well. But a lot of the work has been done as far as the drafting of this actual statement, separate and other from that work. So I'm not going to go through and read it, but the idea was, I will say this too, and any of the three of you, if you want to chime in. Anna likes to pretend that she doesn't like to talk, but I know she'd like to chime in. So trying to get 18 leaders to agree a succinct statement that clarifies the work we are attempting to do is challenging. It went through different iterations, and we arrived at bullets. There were some that didn't like the concept of bullets, but the idea was making this approachable and digestible and easily accessible. We had originally written this as a vision, and a vision statement starts with the we are, or it's not the we will, it's the we are. And I think that was hard because as we talked about the things that we would envision us being, we kept saying, well, we're not right now. And it felt weird to say that. So we landed with an equity statement, which is, and there are other districts, other groups that have arrived at the same kind of a concept where it's identifying what we strive to be as a community. And so for us, it centers around belonging. It doesn't just call out and talk about any one identifier. It's not only about race. It's not only about gender identity. It's not only about socioeconomic issues or academic issues. It's about we strive, again, it starts with we strive to be a community that fosters a collective sense of belonging in our schools and communities as a whole by. So it is all inclusive, and the idea is that as we begin the real work, it's important to say, this isn't the work, right? This is the result of the work of the 4 of us and 14 others aligning ourselves to lead the work, but this isn't the work that needs to happen. But we wanted to have, we went back and forth on this, is it a metric, is it a standard, something that we can point back to whether I'm having a discussion about meeting the academic needs, or we're talking about challenges for a student of color, or we're talking about a transgender student or a staff member, whatever it is, we can go back to this statement and say, the actions we're taking, the words I'm saying, the decisions I'm making, do they honor what we said we were setting out to do? So the idea is that, so I can say we agree. I mean, if anyone wants to add more context, but it took time, but I think this really, it feels good to have a statement that it feels like everyone can, again, we can individually lead, but we need to collectively lead if we're going to be a district. And we talk about challenges in mathematics or ELA adoption, and there's still, right, we're still 3 communities that come together to one middle school, high school, and that will inherently always be challenging. So having the 18 of us leading in the same way is really important. So the idea is that the next steps would be first sharing it with you, feedback, thoughts, and then sharing this out at Convocation. This would be the focus of Convocation. Launching the work in the schools. There is work happening in each of the schools in differing levels and degrees, but more consistently launching the work with groups at each of the schools to start the more challenging issues around it. So, and then obviously after sharing it with staff and faculty on Convocation, then sharing this out with the right.
Does anybody have any comments, concerns, changes?
First of all, I like the way it's focused and trying to be inclusive and all of that. I have a couple of formatting thoughts, but I think those are probably just better emailed.
Okay.
If that works, just there.
So literally formatting, not necessarily, doesn't change
just
the
within the
substance.
bullets, yeah.
Great.
One, so we obviously weren't part of the conversations, so maybe this is included in here, or you're seeing it as included in here, and I'm just not reading it into that. I think it's great on being aware of the needs and experiences and all of that. I think one of the issues that comes up is the actions and behaviors and words that can undermine those needs and all of that. I don't necessarily see that here, but I don't know if you're including it elsewhere. It's something along the lines of developing an understanding of the behaviors that can cause someone not to feel included or something like that. I don't know.
No, I remember talking about that. I think the concept of being aware of and responsive to the unique needs was very high level. I think that's an absolute need, but that's a good takeaway to think about how we can incorporate that. I do think that's a really, that's not hot button issue isn't the right word. It's a spot where people get stuck, right? So it's great to be able to somehow honor that in some way, even if very simply in this. So, yeah.
Anybody else?
So this is probably like what Paul said, but a little different. When I take that draft equity sandwich and I take that big bite, I say, where's the beef? Okay, and that's kind of the same thing I think of what he's saying. When I compare that to the VTV advertising policy, there's beef in that sandwich. You read that VTV policy and it's boom, 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 boom. And I think that's a lot of what Paul's addressing.
You lost me at VTV. So the VTV policy
If you look
later
at
in
that,
the agenda?
If you look at that and you look at the draft equity statement,
You're talking about that later in the agenda?
yeah,
The piece,
they're just two different documents, that's all. And I like the VTV a little better.
meaning level of detail. Yeah, so again, the idea is this is not, this can't be the detailed work, right? This doesn't represent the work. But if we are actually being aware of and responsive to the needs, and we're actually using that knowledge and understanding, and we're doing that by putting the appropriate supports in place. And again, I like that idea of that language. Every other action, we could pages and pages and pages of the work we need to do. This is simply the statement that sets the focus of how we're going to measure and all of the myriad issues and factors that we need to address. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's helpful, Brian, that's great, but I'm just saying that going forward, I think you need to provide that level of detail, because you've got 16, 18 different administrators that are confronted with the situation, and if they have some sort of guidance, rather than just a belonging statement, that's all I'm trying to say. I think everybody needs a little more guidance. And I know that gets sticky, but I think it would really help us as a community going forward to have more.
Yeah, I hear that. So I think it's, yeah, I guess for now I'll say this isn't the work, right? There's a lot, and a lot more needs to come from this. And it's not the work that we're doing on a routine basis, meeting routinely monthly, isn't going to stop either, right? And we had said, this is a living, breathing document, not document, or statement, so that if we feel like, is it trigger words or something that isn't represented there, that we tweak and bring back, it's a starting point, if that makes sense.
I think that's the key thing here, is that we have to start somewhere. And I think this is a good starting place. That I believe the way you're going to do this will be a changing document as you go along during the year. So I think it's a good place to start, even when we, as a committee, were trying to figure out where to start. It was tough to decide what to put down as a statement as to where the beginning is. So I know this is going to be a hard conversation to start anyways. So I think this is a good way to start it.
Right. So it seems like many communities start with race or gender, right, and go right there, and the conversation goes from here to here. So if it doesn't mean that we don't have to have more pointed and honest discussions about race or gender, but to set this as the framework, we're trying to identify and write this in a way that, not that, right, in a way that everyone would read and say, well, yes, of course we do, right? So then, if we're having a discussion about race or gender or another right, we talk about educational issues, we talk about socioeconomic, that's kind of normal banter in educational settings. But as we get into those hotter issues, if we're measuring it against this, it's the same barometer, it's the same standard, and we can still agree to disagree, but this is the reason. So, yeah, I think that's. But certainly, if there are other thoughts, if you have thoughts on words missing, concepts missing as a starting point, would love to have a conversation with any of you individually, because the goal is having it be representative. But yes, to Paul's point, Paul the first, there's a lot more, right? A lot more needed.
As you're bringing it to convocation, it's going to be the start of the conversation. Is everybody okay with this as a starting point? I think that's what he's looking for.
Yeah. And again, if it's not tonight, certainly, you know how to get a hold of me. Love to have a discussion. All right.
Next item is the evaluation of the superintendent. There are 3 attachments to this agenda item in the board docs. You will find 2 documents showing the results of the evaluation surveys you each filled out in May. One is a roll-up of all the responses, and the other is an individual responses. The 3rd document is the summary document that we talked about earlier this year. Previously, we averaged the goal ratings and the standard ratings, recording those in this document, and then using the formula to get to a recommended final rating that the committee either voted through as presented or as amended through this discussion. With the changes decided this spring, you will note only the goals in the standard ratings. The final is blank, and we will need to decide and vote that final now through discussion. Does anyone want to open the conversation?
Say this should have been in the action item section, sorry. Add that to my Val.
Open my
Trying to open
document.
everything.
I can't get it to open.
Do you need this? What do you need?
No, you can go ahead and start. I'll try and get mine to open.
So I guess two comments and then a recommendation. So the first thing is that in the goals, I think it was the first time that I had seen the performing arts recommendations actually sent down in writing. I was a little shocked to see what they were. I felt like you're trying to solve something in 3rd and 4th grade in the hopes of affecting 9th grade with nothing in between, based on what's written there, and maybe that's not all of it, but I think personally that was a shocker for me, which is why that was a significant progress, because I felt like the other part of the goal, I think if I remember correctly, it was one that you had labeled as met. I labeled as significant progress because I don't feel like that piece of it is done. The other side can totally see, but I don't personally feel like that piece of it is done. The other thing is, having gone through this for many years, I always look at member comments and what they show. And I think in the past years, I'll characterize it by saying that most member comments were complimentary, and that that where there were concerns or constructive criticism, it tended to be very different member to member based on what their priorities were, and we already knew them coming from meetings. I think this is the first year. It is still largely complimentary, but where there was constructive criticism, it was all around the same thing. And I want to call that out because I think that's something that has not happened before, and it stuck out to me. Overall, though, just based on the goals ratings and the performance standard ratings, I think that an overall rating of proficient would be appropriate.
Anybody else?
Some question. You said VPA, not ELA, when you're talking about in the goal. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I think what stood out to me was how all the members on one particular, I think it was where you needed progress.
Recommendation. Yep.
And I think we all have roles to carry, whether it's a school committee, the superintendent, administration, teachers, students. We all have roles, we all have responsibilities, and we all have accountability. And in some of that, I don't see that everybody's being held accountable for the jobs that they have. In saying that, I know that in past years, certain individuals have had to have more, do more. What you had to do, you had to have too many eyes in too many places, and being one person, you can't do that. But now you've built a great team around you. There's no reason that people can't be responsible for everything that they're supposed to be responsible for. And it's up to us to hold you accountable, so we expect you to hold other people accountable. So, other than that, I think in most areas you do a fantastic job. You're a great communicator. You try and make sure that between the town and the school committee and families that we're all a budget. But each one of the subcommittees, I believe you're a support system for what we need. So I also believe that your rating on this particular sheet should be proficient as well. Does anybody else have anything else? Going back to the school committee handbook, there's 3 things we're responsible for. It's the budget, evaluating the superintendent, and policy. So I know each one of us takes this seriously. So I don't know what everybody else would like to make sure we have the overall rating on. I believe Narissa and I have said it to be proficient. I don't know if anybody else around the table wants a different one, or if that one is sufficient with everybody. So from what I'm getting at, that the overall rating will be proficient. I don't know if you,
Make a motion that the superintendent's overall evaluation rating be proficient.
any discussion? All those in favor?
So, thank you. So the theme, accountability, right, was the theme. I don't know if anyone said that, but throughout the evaluations and the consistent, I think it's kind of hard to have that discussion without talking about other people. So I don't want to have a public discussion about that. I guess I would say accountability is tough right now. It is absolutely, I don't disagree with anything anyone said, nor do I take offense to that. I think it's accurate. But it's a very hard thing right now, this accountability thing in the current job market we have. So I guess my question would be whether it be that commendations and recommendations, we'll call it, I don't know those are the exact words. There were some comments that I would love to just follow up with people on to get more clarity around, if that's appropriate. I think some people were very clear. I don't have to guess, so that's great, and I'd be happy to chat with those folks as well. But I think there were some comments that I would just love to have a follow-up discussion to hear more and have a constructive discussion about how to change things around. So that's okay. Awesome. Well, thank you then.
Item is the superintendent's report. Superintendent Bryant Forget is going to review his report.
Appreciate you using my full name. So some of the things I can go through quickly in this report. The first is I share with you and publicly every year all of the institutions where students are accepted. And I was talking with Megan Ober, the Director of Guidance, and they're shifting to that as well. And having that discussion because there are many, many reasons that factor into the decision of where a student chooses to go to college or whether they choose to go to college. So the 162 institutions listed here, including some big names this year. We got Bama, and we got some others on the list. So the roughly 170 students that graduated were accepted at 162 different institutions. So there's certainly positive news in that preparation that students are getting here at Triton. The second list, and we already went through that, the retirees. We had that in the agenda itself. Elementary music updates, just to share an update with you as far as decisions that we've been able to, or things we've been able to shift for next year. Narissa referenced it, and I didn't do a good job at all, right? The first thing you heard as far as any recommendation for VPA changes across the board was the addition of the elementary instrumental teacher in the budget process. That wasn't the intention. That's the way it played out. I won't go into reasons and excuses. But so that position was not added for next year. What we are able to do just by an effort to unify and align the schedules across the 3 elementary schools is that all 4th graders will have currently, all students do not participate in chorus across the 3 schools. All students in grade 4 will participate for 1 trimester in that rotating as that 5th special. That will be offset with STEM and SEL. The positions we added in the current year, those are currently kind of teachers are going to them or they're pushing into the classroom. That model hasn't worked well. So this will ensure that all students have access to those teachers throughout the year. So 4th graders all students will rotate through that SEL and STEM as the fifth special. For fourth grade, they'll also have rotated in one trimester, they'll have chorus. Fifth and sixth graders, all students, as that fifth special, one time per week, will have a full year of chorus. So again, it's a small shift, but again, part of the larger plan that I'll do a much better job next year on reporting out to you before changes are proposed. A shift we're able to make for next year. So I'm certainly happy to answer questions if you have about that. But again, there's a lot of factors contributing to our participation numbers. And we're still in the process of unpacking all of those factors. Some of them are obvious, some of them are less obvious, but we've been having the discussion. I've been meeting with the music teachers over the course of the year, and we'll continue with that. So the goal is a more cohesive plan, elementary through high school, but the idea is to start building access at a mandatory level at the elementary, because there are students who will participate and not realize that they liked to sing or that they liked to play an instrument. So that's the premise behind that shift. So if there's no questions, there are questions.
I heard a rumor that at Pine Grove that they figured out a way to get band back into the day as using their citizenship time as an in-school band time, and I was wondering if that's being considered for the other two schools and if there's some truth to it.
There was truth that was a part of a discussion that is not happening next year. So that was an idea of a way to fit it in, and it didn't work in the schedule. But it's those types of discussions that are happening. The three assistant principals have been meeting consistently. I know Dr. Bates has been meeting with them. And so we're talking about chorus right here or band. There's benefit across the board as they're in aligning a master schedule. So when we go to the delivery of curriculum, the time on learning and the amount of time, as Anna was speaking about, there'll be consistency across the three elementary schools for the first time next year. So that's still a topic of discussion. It didn't work out for next year as a concept. Some more tweaks need to be added. Honestly, they need another body, right? It's the ability to have, and we're talking about one more person that would float between the three elementaries. So close. Yes, Paul.
My question is maybe foggy from the last week of school, but the alternate days for the fifth special will be SEL and STEM. So is that for all of the elementary students, K through 4?
K through 6. So you know the better schedule.
No, so, I'm sorry, so Paul, is your question, so all students K through 6 will get one trimester of SEL, one trimester of STEM, and then they rotate through all of those during that sort of third trimester when they're not scheduled, except fourth grade, which will have chorus. That's my understanding.
Yeah. So it's an added time in 5th and 6th grade.
STEM teacher rotating, how do they get a whole trimester of STEM?
They stay for a full trimester.
So the STEM teacher will be at one school for an entire trimester. So,
okay.
yeah, I think it's going to be
that's
great.
much better, yeah.
Yep.
Well, like a residency, right? So it's focused.
Yeah, and I have to say, the assistant principals and principals, we all came together to talk about, I think, what works in scheduling, what doesn't, how did one school manage to do this and another, and they have been wonderful in sort of sharing resources with each other, and have continued, the assistant principals have continued to meet to sort of develop some of these things, so kudos to them.
Another question, what is citizenship at Pine Grove?
Yeah.
I've had a kid there for years.
Yeah. So it's not real clear, hence rumor versus actuality. it was more building a time to, it's not the right word I'm looking for. It doesn't exist as a standalone 40-minute block. You are correct. But it was the idea of using time that could meet that goal of that focus on citizenship. Yeah. Yeah. And it could work, but it doesn't exist now. You're not going crazy. This is how rumors
Get started, right?
and finished.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this is additional time that will be required of the music teacher, current music teacher at each school today.
So there's enough current people to do this.
Okay.
Because it's meeting with a full group. So if I'm a music teacher and there's fourth grade sections, that's 4 classes. If I've got the 5th together or the 6th together, I can do that all classes in one period.
Okay. But that's currently a period that those music teachers have free.
Yes.
Okay.
Or providing other interventions depending on.
That was going to be my question, because I know a lot of the specialists, at least at Pine Grove, get pulled to cover a classroom, to cover a one-on-one, all that stuff. How is that going to affect staffing? Because I know a lot of times they're needed for that cover. Do we have to have other bodies?
There is enough capacity there.
Okay.
With class sizes.
Is that going to affect the budget if it's like X substitute teachers or? Okay.
As classes has number of sections. So it's all driven, so for specialists, it's driven by sections. So if you only have 2 sections or 3 sections in a grade level, if you're only meeting with each section, the difference with chorus, again, is that you're meeting with all the sections at once. So there are a few sections that they're now having to do this, but it doesn't create the impact that you're concerned about. Yeah. To sing together, yes. Yes, for chorus. No, there's usually monitors and there's other folks that are with them, yes.
I'm just
But
asking.
yeah, and that's the way it works now. When you have a grade level doing chorus, and sometimes you put the 5th and the 6th grade with multiple.
Supports. Oh,
But it won't be the classroom teacher because it'll be their planning period. Get the sense you all don't. You're all going. Right, so as the number of sections have decreased, we've kept all of our specialists full-time to utilize them in other ways. So there could be some substitutes, yes, a section here and there, could be, but not at the lack of an intervention or a support or all of those things.
Kyle allowing substitutes?
We got half a day left of school. We have so much money left. Kyle's like, oh crap, I'm part of this discussion now.
We're on the same page. We're aligned. First time I'm speaking tonight.
Yeah. Just getting you in the groove. Yeah, but we're talking about 45 minutes, right? We're not talking about a full day, which at that point, we're paying generally an IA to cover that class. If it's a full, we can't have a specialist cover a full day because they don't ever have an open day. There's 18 different discussions happening going on.
That to be included.
NES Kids Club, Anna alluded to this, that we have certainly had a challenge hiring Kids Club staff, in particular, across all schools. Newbury, it's not happening. I mean, the folks who have been working the program are moving on and making other choices. We haven't been able to fill the director role, who moved into a preschool teaching position. So we, as I reported here, on a one-time, year-long basis, have partnered with the Y so that we can offer something. This is certainly not the avenue we are intending to go down. We had reviewed this several years ago, renting out the space to the YMCA to have them run our programming. This is not an end run to try and make that happen. We don't have an option for Newbury families. 90, 75? I forget the exact number.
High 90s for a
90s
number of students
of
right now.
students. So and certainly Anna and Kyle have been very involved in this, so can answer questions. But the Y has agreed to step in, run the program. They will be utilizing renting the space from us. They have to charge their rates. They can't charge our rates as an organization if they're running a program in another school. They have to provide all the same rates. They have a whole lot more resources as far as their sliding scale, full scholarships. There are lots of donors to the Y who just want to write checks, for deserving families. So they certainly have a much more of a coffers to be able to provide waivers, but the actual sticker price is higher than our current rate. So we don't have the exact rates yet. We're working on that with them. So that is the plan. We had to make a decision when we had originally communicated with families early May, I believe. The message was, we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep working towards this. The problem is if we don't make a decision and we wait until August and we have nothing, then we literally don't have, it's not a matter of people could scream and yell. We don't have an option. So we chose to say, okay, if the Y basically said, Chris Bevilacqua, who's the director, said, if you tell us right now, we will all but guarantee that we'll be able to staff this. And so that's been the discussion, pushing back to say, do you really mean that? Is that really the case? And they're very, very confident that they'll have the staffing to be able to be ready for the fall. So certainly happy to answer questions. It was not the plan. It's not the ideal. But without having the ability to provide a program, we felt like providing a program was better than no program at all. And they are not able to provide before school. We talked about, is there a way to kind of finagle that with them? But at this point, we still haven't figured that out. So it would be a 3 to 6 program.
Question?
Oh, sorry.
Had this conversation, but I just wanted to reiterate again that my concern is that they cannot staff that, and I know that that's something that you push. Do we have a contract in place, anything where there's a penalty? I just worry because they had Camp Cedar Mill running as an after-school program. That closed because they didn't have enough people. I don't know if this is 100% true, but I heard that people are having trouble getting into their summer camps because they don't have the capacity. I want to have faith that they're not going to fail our families at the last minute, but I hope we have some sort of a guarantee. There's no guarantee, obviously, but something in place to make sure that this is not going to be a last minute, like, hey, we just can't provide your kids after school care.
Yeah, there's no way to have a penalty. It's the same thing with our bus contract, right? At the end of the day, if the buses don't show up, we don't pay for those buses, but there's no way they can guarantee. What we, through the discussions, they have a better, not retention pool, but a candidate pool. They have a better avenue to find the people that we're just not finding. So can they guarantee? No. And there's no contract that we'd be able to sign where they would ever sign and say, yeah, we're going to pay a penalty if we can't hire the people. But those have been some honest conversations about the experience in Rowley specifically. Sure.
So when I get to NES at about 7:15 usually, my kids are normally about number 10 or 11 in the door. So I guess I'm wondering, is there any way of partnering with or utilizing the coordinators at Pine Grove and Salisbury perhaps, and maybe being able to get a couple people to staff the morning? Because I know that there are families who everybody's out the door by 7 or 7:15, and that's for the buses.
Yeah, so we're still trying to make sure that we have, I know Pine Grove is down a few at this point in time, so we're not even fully staffed at the other schools to be able to run their before and after school program. So it is more limited numbers, And I know we had a conversation and it hasn't, I don't think it's been teased out yet, but we've talked about other ways of being able to incentivize. If we can even have them pay their rates that they pay their staff are lower than the rates we're currently paying. So we talked about, is there a way if they pay our even teachers at that contractual rate to get them there? So still trying to work through all the possibilities. They are restricted because as an organization, if they're running the program, they have to follow their.
Conversations for the morning piece of where we left off with them is if we do run a morning program, it would be independent of the Y, and the agreement articulates that, so it would be separate. So we do have the ability to continue to look into that, or to try and push it forward, but with those constraints.
And we are still, will be looking for a morning coordinator and to offer that. Our applicants have just been very, very limited. And I'd be worried about not only coordination, but can we staff it?
On that, way less than ideal situation. Next is an overall staffing update. So I know we had asked earlier, summer school, the ESY program is fully staffed. There are still a few one-on-ones with high needs students in those Kids Club programs that we're looking for. But other than that, as far as the positions, the general school year academic positions, still the hot button issues or the hot button positions with Kids Club, with instructional assistants. But we've found great candidate pools and great candidates for classroom teaching positions. We've now hired a new wellness coordinator, a new director or manager of facilities and grounds. Was one of the positions I was just thinking of. So there, for all of the other positions, we have been finding a decent candidate pool. It does help this year. We have an open list of positions that's about 25% of the positions that we were hiring for last year, just because of the turnover and the number of retirements last year. So in good shape, other than the usual, obviously, bus drivers. We're still working with NRT to get Kyle his life back. Just an FYI, and I only put this in here because of the fact that there was correspondence that came out from the Department of Ed. They have a program, or it's a curriculum resource called, it's Investigating History. So they're releasing this slowly, and unit by unit. And just wanted to put it out there that this is on Dr. Bates' radar. Obviously, she has a thorough curriculum review process. There are folks who have been meeting with that curriculum review committee group. So it's out there. Again, it's the first lesson or the first unit of the first module for grades 5 and 6 and 7 that were just released. So we're not going to make any decisions. We're in cycle already. And certainly we would never even consider this until we can see the full annual scope of this product, if it's even worth pausing and considering and looking at. So just in case you see that correspondence from the department, just want to make sure that we put it out there that it is on the radar. Currently no action.
Can I pop in on that a little bit? I'm very excited about this potential. I went to a webinar when it was released and heard from teachers who were using the program and talking about, it was like a 30-year teacher who had never been so excited about it. I saw student work from it. It's aligned with the standards. It looks like it's really inquiry-based, and they actually have been on schedule. They've been adhering to the schedule that they presented in terms of rollout. So there were schools across the state that piloted it this year. All first units are out, and they're rolling them out throughout the next year, so that by, I think they said January, all of the units would be out. I'm excited because there's no other curriculum that's fully aligned with our standards. We did have stage 1 of the curriculum review process this year. We're looking for standards aligned materials and do have some interest in exploring this from a couple 4th and 5th grade teachers for next year. One of the units, even if the whole thing is not rolled out. Also looking at other curriculum as well that has been part of our exploration process.
Like time for Dr. Bates versus Mr. Forget tonight. That's right. Thanks for bringing that up.
Saturday at 7 and Sunday at 2.
Thanks, Matt. This is great. All right, that's my report. If there's any questions on any of the items.
I have a motion to receive and file the June 2023 Superintendent's Report as presented.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Continuing with Mr. Forget, advertising and sports streaming.
Yes. Turn my mic back on. This actually came to the policy subcommittee a couple months ago. This was a proposal from Bob Lathrop, who is entirely teaching video production now. It has become a very popular class. And the genesis was boosters coming to VTV to say, hey, can we hire you to come and broadcast and commentate our games? And so there are several students that have done that. It's become a routine thing. Students are paid. So Bob actually brought the proposal forward that they would manage this as a concept and actually go out and work with the groups. Obviously, if there's a group that's interested in doing it, they could drum up interest, but that VTV would manage the actual raising of the funds. The concept is that the group would commit, so call it basketball. The basketball team would, if they have 8 home games, they would commit with VTV. They go out and raise the, do we say it was $280? Get the exact dollar value. Yeah, for a typical game, $240. So that's it's $25 an hour paid to the students. For a basketball game, there'd be 2 video crew and then 2 commentating crew, and then a $40 per event coordination fee for a VTV staff member who's going to oversee the production of that. They would have to raise the funds for that entire season. So if there were 8 home games, they would come up with the $1,600, $1,700, $1,800. Again, it would go directly into district coffers. The district would then pay. This would all go through Kyle's separate revolving account. We would pay these students directly. And then they would be, I guess they call it the lower third, right? That banner on the bottom of the screen. They would be an advertisement, just a simple badge. And then, as noted here, they would give a little shout out as they're commentating the game. The policy subcommittee talked through kind of conflicts with, is there an advertising issue if it's on VTV or on YouTube? We're not a monetized channel, so no. Bob worked with the local cable television access groups to make sure that there weren't any restrictions, and as long as it's not, there were a couple guidelines there about it's not propaganda, not political in nature, then that's fine. So that's the concept. The policy subcommittee, policy and advocacy subcommittee was okay with it as a concept and asked that I bring it to you directly. The one thing that you would be doing is that policy KHB doesn't allow advertising for school events. So this would be waiving, as we've said, right? This doesn't, we're not suggesting you remove the policy, but for this activity, you'd be waiving that policy because it's a district related, it's a district program, if you will. So some of the questions they asked, and it's now teased out in the details, is it was born out of a home athletics game request. But if there were other groups or organizations or VPA or other events that would also be made available to them. They work with VTV, raise the funds, collect the funds in advance of the commitment. And again, the VTV students and Bob wouldn't schedule it and commit to it until all the funds were collected. So the idea is not picking and choosing one game, but committing to a full season so that they can make sure the program remains viable. So the idea, Bob felt it was important to start with VTV owning this, and my concern was them becoming full-time fundraisers, but the burden would be on the groups that are going to kind of bring in the sponsors, if you will, but that it would be ultimately managed through VTV so that we don't have different groups collecting funds, submitting funds. It would all be through an online platform, and checks would be cut directly to the district, managed through Kyle. This is no cash floating around. And there was a question about, could we rotate all of the sponsors through all the games in case a game gets canceled? But it's a little complicated as far as how that lower third works, and being able to manage that live during a game. So, questions on that? The one thing I said in here, if you agree that this is a good concept, the one kind of hanging chad here is how we restrict who can advertise. So it's easy to say groups that don't align with district policy, alcohol, right? Package stores is easy, but there are other gray areas. So if you agree with this, I didn't want to spend lawyer dollars if there was a non-starter, but it would next be teasing out that specific language in the regulations of who we say can actually advertise. And there is a way to restrict it. It's not just if we don't do it well, we leave ourselves open to liabilities, but there is absolutely a way forward to be able to say, here's who is acceptable and who's not acceptable to be an advertiser.
Is there anything documented anywhere that the district is not funding this?
Is there anywhere? The only documentation that exists right now is what's in front of you. It's beyond a concept.
I don't see that the district is not.
The one piece I would add is it mentions that this is being accounted for in a revolving fund, which naturally by statute, that's a self-supporting group of accounts outside of the general operating budget of the district. So it's not explicitly said, but by mentioning.
What I mean by that is if a particular sport isn't able to come up with sponsors, that they would feel slighted or whatever and expect the district to pay for it, that this isn't being sponsored by the district.
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't say the district shall not pay for this, but it explicitly says that this is up to the groups to find the sponsors. So that's certainly something I can take away and talk with our attorneys to make sure that's not something where we would get stuck in that situation.
Right. I just want to make sure there's no loophole that one particular group isn't able to get enough sponsors to broadcast their games, that equity-wise we're not.
Yeah, I think that could be a public perception problem. Legally, this is not where we get into problems is when something that's a compulsory part of education that every other student has access to, if we're restricting access. So in this case, this is an extra. This is a cool extra other. So I don't think we would legally be in problems. I'll confirm that. But perception-wise, that could absolutely become a challenge, and perception can become reality. We'll have strong feelings about athletics.
Wondering if there was a way that the boosters are funding this and the district is not.
I was saying that's an equity issue, having the boosters pay for it because they don't all have the level of interest in our sport for fundraising.
And I will say that was, in Bob's, when I said that, are you able to take that on? That was his response, is some boosters have very strong support. Others, I should say, some sports have very strong booster support. Other sports don't at all. So the idea is every group has access to it, just go out and find the money. And if it's a 3, 4, 5 home games, it's not a ton of money, especially when we're offering advertising at this level where it's going to be live and then it's going to be in perpetuity on demand. So that's $240 for, it's high school sports. It's not like it's the NBA playoffs, but it's something that happens live for 2 hours and then something that lives on in perpetuity. And most of the games are picked up by the town cable access. So a lot of those are replayed over and over and over again. So it's very different than other advertising that boosters have been able to offer in the past with back of a football program.
Anybody else? Oh.
I was just going to say, I think this is a good idea. I sat on policy when this was being reviewed. I believe it should go to legal and put some framework around it and then send that back to policy, my fabulous former subcommittee. I think that's the appropriate thing to do, is to kind of let them hash it out and poke holes like they did with the initial presentation. I would like to also kind of have a look at kind of the exception things that happen in games. So with having looked at this and watching some recent sports, I'm noting it was an away game, but the girls softball game that was started on a Friday, I believe, and finished on a Sunday, how that would be accounted for, because obviously there's a lot of extra work involved in that. And also reading in the news today about, I believe it was Northbridge versus Abington baseball game that ended up going 14 innings and 4 hours. Obviously, if we've only gotten $240 up front and then we're on the hook to pay students for a full 4 hours, exactly how that would work.
So the one thing I would say is this is only home games, so not away.
Yeah.
Right. So that
But
Friday then Sunday was traveling to Plymouth.
But that could happen.
But
here
home
as
hit,
well.
absolutely. Yep. So the idea is it's hourly. It's not a set, but we would be collecting, as you suggested, based on that hourly. So, yep, tease that out.
And the district doesn't pay for it.
Brian, I just have a question. How would you deal with the timing of it? So if there was a basketball game at the same time there was a field hockey game, how does all that work?
So it would be, the idea is that if we're committing to a full season, that's how Bob's able to schedule that. So again, there are, I don't know if you know, Anna, 115? I think there are 6 sections of video production now. So the number of students who have it available, right? We working the system tonight, right? So there's a lot more students involved, but that's the idea, is that if we know well before the season, we know the home games, can place all the pieces. It tends to be the same students who like to video the home basketball games or the home field hockey, what have you. So that's the idea of doing it well in advance.
Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to the medication delegation authorization.
So just to confirm, I'm going to bring back some questions as well as those very explicit regulations about who can and can't advertise back to the subcommittee. Okay. Thank you.
It's a routine item each spring. I am requesting that the board approve the medication delegation form attached, allowing the nurses to administer routine medications and EpiPens, and I will sign the document to complete the approval process once.
Motion?
Best to have the full motion, yeah.
I'll make a
I
motion.
make the motion to approve the continued process of the delegation of the administration of routine medicine or epinephrine EpiPen to students under the direction of the school nurse as routinely
It's the
done.
one above it.
Shoot. I make a motion to authorize the chairperson to sign on behalf of the school committee authorizing medication delegation as outlined in the proposal and in accordance with Massachusetts 105 CMR 210.00.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Now, Kyle Warren, the Director of Finance and Operations, is going to review the process update to student meal prices.
It's a pleasure to speak before you this evening. So attached to the agenda is an update here, student meal prices. So just to preface all of this, student meals, breakfast and lunch is still set to be free for next year. The theme of this memo, or the purpose of it, is regarding the extra full meals that students have the opportunity to purchase at lunchtime. DESE, Department of Education, regulates a minimum floor pricing for these second meals that are served, and where our prices have not been updated in several years, we're no longer in compliance with those regulations. There have actually been waivers over the past few years due to COVID, where they waived those requirements, but now where those waivers are no longer in place, we now have to become in compliance. So about 2/3 of the way down there, it details the elementary, middle school, and high school prices for both breakfast and lunch. It's the new set of rates brings middle school and high school prices in line with each other because of the comparable, both the regulation as well as the comparable meal sizes, and then elementary is less than that. I can certainly go into more detail or take questions if you have them, but there is a little bit of a buffer also between the regulated price and what we're charging in anticipation of future increases by DESE, so we don't have to come back to you in the fall. So that's the difference there. But yeah, any questions?
Any questions?
Hopefully, yeah.
I have a motion to approve an increase in student meal prices as presented or amended.
Could you read the full thing, please? Just kidding.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Just to confirm that, so if universal meals does not pass, that increased rate is what students have to pay. So just to confirm, hopefully that's not an issue. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep.
But to your, yeah.
The next item is authorization for the treasurer to borrow. Before we move on into subcommittee reports, we have the annual authorization to borrow. This is routine and allows the treasurer to borrow in the short term if revenue is delayed.
I'll make a motion to authorize the district treasurer with the approval of the chairperson of the school committee to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of the revenue for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023, in accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 17.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Now we move on to subcommittee reports. Policy and Advocacy, Paul Goldner.
Policy and Advocacy met earlier today. We discussed several items, including updated wellness policy, or updates to wellness policy, which will be getting more getting further updates on based on the feedback, and we'll be coming to you with an updated wellness policy sometime in the fall. We also discussed potential advocacy around the Thrive Act, receiving feedback from the superintendent and director of curriculum and instruction. We might be looking at sending a letter to the Education Committee expressing our concern that the Thrive Act as written might put substantial hurdles in front of districts. We also discussed Student of the Month, and we, in the past, the committee has sent the nominees who were not awarded Student of the Month, the blurb that was written about them, and we are recommending that the committee do this again. From the chair of the school committee, the superintendent would put that together to send those out to the families so that everybody who is nominated, the families receive the nomination proposal, as those are highly motivating, we think, for students and would be rewarding for students to receive, as well as their families. We're also recommending that the superintendent post a bulleted list of who the nominees were. We also started discussing the potential, the district is changing its communication and will be using Parent Square app and potentially putting together a mailing that goes to community members who are not associated with Triton, so that everybody in the towns can receive periodic updates about what might be open to the full community, events that are happening in special, not the full weekly newsletters, but something that is more targeted. We will have a meeting some point in the future yet to be determined to choose a new chair.
It's Paul Mayette.
We last met on the 25th, which, the way things are going, seems a long, long time ago. I think the most important highlight to bring up from that meeting was that there was a discrepancy with the electric billing because of our solar reimbursement that Kyle was looking to square away, and we'll get an update on that in our next meeting. And I guess I should throw it to you to ask. I know we were close. You said, I think, 65,000 left, with about 50 probably going to subs at that point. And
Exactly, yeah, so super tight this year, like we had been discussing, and then with the circuit breaker and school choice, having to dip into a little bit of those reserves. Not initially planned, but we had adequate funding there for those purposes.
we will also be reforming, since my entire subcommittee left. Not taking it personally at all.
Personnel negotiation, Paul Lees.
We haven't met. I do have a question, though. Nicole, do you know if there's any outstanding minutes? Do you know if there's any outstanding minutes that I didn't get through? Yeah, that's what I meant. Okay. I'll leave those up to my two able colleagues.
Lasting legacy. Before we adjourn, I put these around the table. These are from the asset builder that Julie Romano had sent out to everybody if they would like to go. This was what she was handing out, and it gives a lot of great information. I want to take a moment to thank Kyle for all your work on the bus. I know it was your life's work this year. And I think you did a great job informing all those parents and everything. But I was wondering about, is that app coming out or is it already out?
To track the buses, yeah, so we'll have that in, it is available, and we'll have it in place for next school year. There were a couple of different things that went on, why that wasn't rolled out this year. But yes, absolutely. Paired with Parent Square, will be a real, they say, a dynamic duo.
There you go.
He's kind to say there were a couple of things that went on this year, I think is how he just described. More than a couple.
I want to thank everybody for all the work that you do. It takes a village. Have a nice summer, and we'll see you in August. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor? Oh, wait, any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you and have a nice night.